Hello everyone, I am Andrea Osablada. So I'm gonna discuss about the communication accommodation theory. Howard Gillis. Howard Gillis is a professor of linguistics and psychology at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Gillis developed this theory in 1973. Howard Gillis, the professor of communication at the University of California, developed the theory which is, according to him, is when people try to emphasize or minimize the social difference between the others whom they interact with. So the factors that lead to accommodation activity are adjustment, which can be through verbal communication or through gesture. The theory was involved from speech, but the theory encompasses more fields such as nonverbal gesture. So, accommodation theory. Communication theory is the way the speaker adjusting speech, vocal patterns, and or gesture to accommodate the interlocutor in a certain communication. So, purpose. People change the way they speak to be better understand others to accommodate to their communication needs. So, there are two types of accommodation process. So, first is the speech convergence. So, it's the way the speakers move their speech closer towards each other. So, speech convergence is when people adjust their way of speaking to sound more like the person they are talking to. So this can involve challenging their accent, vocabulary, or even their pace of speech. So it's often done unconsciously to build a rapport and create a sense of connection. Now, for example, a young person might start using slang terms talking to their friends to sound more like them. Speech divergence. So, speech divergence is the way in which both speakers accentuate their verbal and nonverbal differences. So, speech divergence is when people intentionally emphasize their differences in communication. So, often to maintain their individuality, express resistance, or highlight social distance. So, this can involve using distinct vocabulary, accentuating a regional dialect, or adopting a more formal tone compared to the other speaker. There are three types of speech convergence. So, downward convergence, upward, and the mutual. So, first is the downward convergence. Occurs when people in upper class, such as people with an RP, toning down their way of speak to people in a lower class. For example, a university professor who typically speak in a formal and academic manner might simplify their language and use more colloquial terms when talking to a student who comes from a working class background. So, this will be an example of downward convergence as the person is adapting their speech to be more accessible to the student. Upward convergence. So, upward convergence occurs when lower class people trying to eliminate some of the stronger regional feature of their speech when they speak to the upper class. For example, a young person from a working class family who speak with a strong regional accent might try to tone down their accent and use more standard English when applying for a job at a prestigious company. So, they might avoid using slang or colloquialism and instead try to speak in a more formal and articulate manner. So this is an example of upward convergence because the person is consciously adjusting their speech to sound more like the people they perceive to be in a higher social class. Mutual convergence. Mutual convergence occurs when the speaker and the interlocutor adjust their speech toward each other. So, for example, two friends, one from the city and one the countryside, both adjust their speech to use less slang and more standard English, making their conversation easier to understand for both. So, the strength and the weaknesses. The strength, it shows how adaptable communication can be and how social identity plays a role in communication. So weaknesses, it focuses mainly on people intentionally trying to fit in or stand out. It assumes that people always change their communication on purpose. Kung gamitin natin in research, so magamit natin dyan both qualitative or quantitative.